You're just a burden. Stay away, my sister texted on Christmas Eve. I'd spent months covering her debts while she partied. That night, she toasted to freedom from leeches. I stayed quiet until the next morning, when her car was gone and a tow notice sat where it used to be. I, 31M, stared at my phone screen, reading the message for the third time. The words burned into my retinas like a brand. You're just a burden. Stay away. My sister had sent it at 11:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, while I sat in my empty apartment surrounded by wrapped gifts I'd bought for her kids. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months earlier, she'd called crying about eviction notices and past due utilities. I'd transferred $800 that same night, money I'd scraped together from overtime shifts at the warehouse. 3 weeks later, another call, car payment overdue, threatening repossession. Another $600 gone from my savings. I scrolled through my bank statements, counting the transfers, rent payments, grocery money, daycare fees for her twins. The numbers added up to nearly $7,000 over 8 months. My vacation fund, my emergency savings, even money I'd set aside for Mom's birthday gift. All of it gone to keep my sister afloat while she posted Instagram stories from trendy bars and weekend getaways. The worst part wasn't the money. It was how she'd asked for it each time, tears streaming down her face as she explained how desperate things had gotten, how she couldn't let the kids see her fail, how I was the only person she could trust, the only family who understood her situation after her divorce. I'd believed every word. My phone buzzed with a notification from her Instagram. A video from tonight's Christmas Eve party at some upscale restaurant downtown. She raised a champagne glass to the camera, her face flushed with alcohol and laughter. The caption read, "Toasting to 2024, freedom from leeches and toxic people. New year, new me." The comments poured in from her friends, all variations of "you deserve better," and "cut out the negativity." I recognized several faces from her social media, the same people she'd been partying with while telling me she couldn't afford groceries. I set my phone down and walked to my kitchen window. Her car sat in the visitor parking spot directly below, a silver Honda she'd bought 3 months ago with money I'd given her for emergency repairs on her old vehicle. She'd traded up without telling me, keeping the extra cash for herself. Something cold settled in my chest as I stared down at that car. Not anger exactly, but a clarity I hadn't felt in months. All those tearful phone calls, all those promises to pay me back once she got on her feet, all those times she'd made me feel guilty for even hesitating to help. It had all been an act. I opened my laptop and pulled up my insurance account. As her emergency contact and co-signer on several loans, I had more access to her financial information than she probably remembered. The insurance policy on her Honda showed my name as a secondary holder, something she'd added when she needed my credit score to get better rates. The car payment history told an interesting story. She'd missed the last 2 months, despite the money I'd sent her specifically for transportation costs. The loan company had already started repossession proceedings. All it would take was one anonymous tip about the vehicle's location. I researched the repossession laws in our state. They could take the car from any public parking area without warning, as long as they didn't breach peace or enter private property. The visitor parking at my complex counted as public access. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed the number for her loan company. The automated system transferred me to their recovery department, where a tired-sounding representative confirmed the account details I provided. They'd been looking for the vehicle for 6 weeks. The owner had been avoiding their calls and hadn't responded to certified letters. I gave them the exact location, parking spot number, and a description of the silver Honda. They'd have a tow truck there within 2 hours, the representative assured me. Standard overnight recovery, no drama, just gone by morning. After hanging up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Part of me wanted to call her, to warn her somehow. The same instinct that had made me send money every time she called in tears. But then I remembered the text message, still glowing on my phone screen. "You're just a burden. Stay away." She'd made her choice. I went to bed around 1 a.m., setting my alarm for 6:30. I wanted to see the aftermath myself. Update 1. The car was gone when I looked out my window the next morning. In its place sat a bright yellow notice tucked under a small rock, the tow company's standard notification that a vehicle had been recovered from this location. I made coffee and waited. She always slept late on holidays, especially after drinking. The call would come eventually. It came at 9:15 a.m. My phone rang with her contact photo, a selfie she'd taken at some party months ago, all smiles and fake eyelashes. I let it ring through to voicemail. She called again immediately. Then again. The voicemail she left was exactly what I'd expected. Panic, confusion, accusations that someone must have stolen her car. She needed me to come over right away, needed help calling the police, needed me to drive her to the impound lot. The same desperate tone she'd used every time she needed money, except now there was real fear underneath it. I texted back a simple message, "Can't help today. Too much of a burden." She called 6 more times over the next hour. I ignored each one. By noon, she'd apparently figured out what happened. The texts started coming in rapid succession, each one more furious than the last. She'd called the loan company and discovered someone had reported the car's location. She knew it was me. Who else could it have been? Her messages swung between rage and bargaining. First, I was a vindictive bastard who destroyed her life over a stupid argument. Then she was sorry about the text. She'd been drinking. She didn't mean it. Then back to anger. How could I do this to her kids? How could I ruin their Christmas? I screenshot every message and saved them to a folder on my phone. Evidence, in case this escalated further. Around 2 p.m., she showed up at my door. I watched through the peephole as she pounded on the wood, shouting my name. She looked exactly like I'd expected, hungover, desperate, and furious. Her makeup was smeared from crying, and she was still wearing the same dress from her Instagram story. She demanded I let her in, demanded I explain myself, demanded I help fix this mess. I stayed silent on the other side of the door until she finally gave up and left. Update 2. The next few days brought a parade of family members to my phone. Mom called first, confused and worried. My sister had told her some story about a misunderstanding, about me being angry over nothing and taking revenge. Mom wanted to know my side of the story. I told her everything. The months of loans, the Instagram posts, the Christmas Eve text. I showed her the bank transfers, the screenshots, the evidence I'd been collecting without even realizing it. Mom went quiet for a long time after I finished. She told me she'd received her own calls from my sister over the past year, requests for money that Mom had assumed I was also helping with. Apparently, my sister had been double-dipping, telling each of us that the other couldn't help this time. My uncle called next, then my cousin. The same pattern, my sister reaching out to everyone, spinning a story about my sudden cruelty, my unreasonable anger over a harmless text message. But when I showed them the evidence, when I walked them through the timeline of lies and manipulation, their tune changed quickly. The family group chat that had been buzzing with concern for my sister went quiet. No one was taking her calls anymore. She tried a different approach after that. Mutual friends reached out, people who'd known us both since high school. They'd heard she was going through a rough time, that family drama was making things worse. Couldn't I find it in my heart to forgive whatever had happened? I started forwarding them the same evidence package I'd shown my family. Bank statements, screenshots, the full timeline of manipulation. Most stopped asking questions after that. Update 3. 3 weeks later, I got a call from my nephew, my sister's 12-year-old son. He was crying, asking if I was really never going to talk to his mom again. She'd told him and his sister that uncle was angry about something grown up, that they might not see me anymore. That call nearly broke my resolve. These kids had nothing to do with their mother's lies. They'd been excited about the Christmas presents I'd bought them, presents that were still sitting in my closet because I'd never had the chance to give them. I arranged to meet them at a McDonald's near their school, without their mother's knowledge. They were confused but happy to see me, chattering about their holiday break and asking when I was coming to visit again. I explained things as simply as I could. Sometimes adults make mistakes with money and lying, and sometimes there are consequences. I love them both, but I needed some space from their mom right now. It wasn't their fault, and it didn't change how I felt about them. They seemed to understand, in that way kids do when they sense something important is happening in the adult world around them. My nephew hugged me extra tight when I dropped them off, whispering that he hoped things would get better soon. I gave them the Christmas presents I'd bought, a new video game for him, art supplies for his sister. Their faces lit up with the same joy I'd been hoping to see on Christmas morning. Update 4. By February, the full scope of my sister's financial situation became clear. Without my regular cash infusions, her carefully constructed house of cards started collapsing. The repo company had been just the beginning. Her apartment lease was 3 months behind. She'd been using my money to cover partial payments while telling the landlord she was waiting on assistance programs. The eviction notice came in early March. The daycare called me by mistake. My number was still listed as an emergency contact. They were concerned about unpaid fees and wanted to discuss payment plans. When I explained I was no longer involved in the children's care arrangements, the confusion in the woman's voice was obvious. My sister had apparently been telling them I was handling the financial arrangements. Credit card companies started garnishing her wages. Utility disconnection notices piled up. The life she'd been funding with my money and borrowed time finally caught up with her. She moved back in with Mom in April, bringing the kids and what remained of her belongings. Mom called to give me updates, her voice tired and frustrated. My sister spent most days applying for jobs and complaining about how I'd ruined her life with my petty revenge. Mom had run the numbers herself by then. The money I'd given my sister over 8 months could have covered a year's worth of rent at a modest apartment. Instead, it had disappeared into restaurant bills, shopping sprees, and nights out while she played the victim to anyone who would listen. Update 5. The breakthrough came in June, 6 months after the Christmas Eve text. My sister finally got a job, not the high-paying office position she'd been holding out for, but steady work at a local insurance agency. The pay was enough to cover basic expenses if she budgeted carefully. She called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice different than I'd heard it in years. Quiet, tired, maybe even humble. She wanted to talk, she said. Really talk, not just argue or make demands. We met at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where neither of us would feel cornered. She looked older somehow, worn down by months of actual consequences for her choices. The designer clothes and perfect makeup were gone, replaced by department store basics and a more natural look. She started with an apology. Not the dramatic, tearful kind she'd used when asking for money, but something smaller and more real. She'd been angry for months, she said, angry at me for not enabling her anymore, angry at herself for getting so deep into debt and lies. The job had been a wake-up call. Having to account for every dollar, having to actually budget and plan, having to tell her kids no when they asked for things. It had forced her to confront the reality she'd been avoiding with my money. She'd been in therapy too, something Mom had insisted on as a condition of living at home. The therapist was helping her understand how the manipulation had started, how she'd convinced herself that borrowing money was different from stealing it, how she'd built an entire identity around being the victim of circumstances. She asked if I could forgive her someday, not immediately, and not with any expectation that things would go back to how they were. But eventually, maybe we could find a way to be family again. I told her I'd think about it. Final update. It's been 8 months since that coffee shop conversation. My sister has kept her job and moved into a small apartment with the kids. She's paying Mom back in small monthly installments for the help she received during those difficult months. She texts me occasionally, updates about the kids, photos from school events, nothing demanding or manipulative. Just the ordinary communications between siblings who are slowly rebuilding trust. I've started responding sometimes. Short messages, nothing too personal yet, but enough to keep the door open. The kids visit me once a month now, a compromise that lets them maintain their relationship with their uncle while respecting the boundaries I need with their mother. They're doing well, better grades, fewer behavioral problems at school, more stability in their daily routines. My sister paid back her first $100 last month. It was money she didn't owe me legally. I'd never asked for formal loan agreements. But she sent it anyway with a note saying she understood it would take years to restore what she'd broken. I put the money in a savings account I'd opened for her kids' college fund. She doesn't know about it yet, but someday I'll tell them both about the account that started with money their mother sent to apologize for lying. The Christmas Eve text is still saved in my phone, a reminder of how quickly family relationships can turn toxic when honesty disappears. But I've also saved the more recent messages, the ones where she shares small victories and asks about my life without demanding anything in return. Recovery is slow, but it's happening. Some days I think we might actually rebuild something genuine from the wreckage of all those lies. Other days I remember the champagne toast to freedom from leeches and wonder if I'm being naive again. But the difference now is that I'm not carrying the financial burden of her choices anymore. She's learning to live within her means, to face consequences, to be honest about her limitations. The person she's becoming might actually be someone I can trust again. Time will tell. For now, it's enough that the kids are safe, that she's working, and that I don't dread seeing her name on my phone anymore. Sometimes the best revenge is simply stepping back and letting someone face the natural consequences of their actions. The repo truck was just the beginning. The real lesson came in all the months that followed, when she had to learn who she was without my money to cushion her falls. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with friends or family who might enjoy it too. Your support means a lot. And if you have any thoughts, questions, or story ideas, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. See you in the next story.